Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us once again on this really, really lovely installment that we've got for you this Friday on Ask the Experts. Today, we've got a really, really, really amazing guest who's going to help us unpack what burnout and compassion fatigue for healthcare workers looks like and how we can help to resolve it. We know that a lot of healthcare workers are sort of put into or pummeled into the space of having to care for others. And at times that takes away a lot from them. So Dr. Alicia Porter is going to help us understand what burnout and compassion fatigue looks like and how we can, again, help to unpack it and also to manage it. Just to give you a brief understanding of who Dr. Porter is, she is a child and adolescent psychiatrist in private practice and was previously the clinical head of the Child and Family Unit at Charlotte Maxeke Johannesburg Academic Hospital. She is a joint appointee and lecturer in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Witwatersrand. She completed her undergraduate training at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in 2002 and her specialist training at the College of Medicine of South Africa and the Royal College of Psychiatrists in 2010. Dr. Porter has a diploma in human rights, mental health, and law from the Indian College in Pune, India, which she obtained in 2019. Her special interests are child and adolescent mental health, women's mental health in the workplace, and burnout. She's a mental health advocate and believes in mental health promotion and primary prevention. Dr. Alicia, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We're really, really happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Owetsu, and it's really lovely to be here.
Thank you. So I'd like to just get into it and to again unpack this conversation. Many mental health care or healthcare workers still care deeply about their work, but sometimes feel emotionally drained or maybe even despondent to it. What is usually going on when someone reaches that point?
So I think, when you're working in the healthcare profession, oftentimes you'll hear in the corridors, I'm tired, I'm tired, I'm tired. But I actually think, what does that I'm tired actually mean? Because I think it's more than just like physical exhaustion. I think it's really more about like emotional exhaustion. It's the moral distress. There's a lot of unprocessed grief even within the healthcare sector. Our day-to-day jobs in the healthcare sector is kind of, I often say we need danger pay every day, not just from a psychological and an emotional point of view. And
Yeah.
I really think that healthcare workers are carrying more than just the physical overload. You're carrying with you the emotional weight of the lack of resources or the scarcity within the system failures, because oftentimes that comes directly back to the healthcare worker. If there's shortages in the hospital, it's always the healthcare worker WhatsApp groups that are going like, can we do a collection for bread? Because so that does, over time then impact. But also we live in, particularly in our South African context, we can't ignore, the amount of violence within our society, the poverty. And sometimes there's like preventable loss. And I think when you know that you could have prevented a loss, but because of the system and the failings in the system and the lack of the resources, we're carrying all of those things. So tiredness definitely kind of hides that chronic stress, that hypervigilance,
Yes.
that grief that was never acknowledged. I mean, COVID was really traumatic, particularly for healthcare workers, but we were very busy taking care of others. That sense of like helplessness and betrayal by the system, and even just that emotional overload, and there's just no space to overload because you just got to get, you got to get on with it. So what that kind of I'm tired is carrying, kind of your body saying, like, I've carried way too much for too long and I haven't gotten any relief from this.
Yeah. I think it's quite interesting how you've basically given context to the word I'm tired. And that's normally our response, right? We don't shy away from it and say I'm fine or I'm okay. People normally actually come up and say, I'm tired. But it's also interesting to find out and to understand that it veils so many of these intricacies and factors that healthcare workers have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, which isn't just one issue but really is like a conglomerate of issues.
But Owetu, I'm not even sure that healthcare workers themselves appreciate the weight of what they're carrying. So
Yeah.
is this weight, it is articulated as I'm tired, but it's so much more than just I'm tired, because a good night's sleep doesn't solve that problem.
Yeah, yeah. That really is very important. I'm so glad that we're highlighting it at the beginning of this session so that when viewers are looking at this and they're watching it and watching this, they carry that sentiment throughout the session and even when they are reflecting later on. So when we talk about this, at what point does caring deeply for a patient or for patients begin to cost someone their own sense of self and their own mental health? And can mental health or healthcare workers rather start to recognize that shift?
So, I mean, I definitely think it's when, you start losing interest, where, you used to, also when you're making more mistakes than you usually do, you lose interest, where, there's an irritability that comes in. Also, when it's kind of like the only time you deriving any kind of value is when you're doing something. You have to be doing to be valuable. That's a red flag, or just this I can't say no.
Yeah.
This kind of not listening to your body. I often ask healthcare workers, like, when was the last time you actually stopped to ask yourself, like, what does my body need? Because we often wear like these badges of honor, like, it was so busy today, I didn't get a chance to go to the loo, I didn't eat lunch, I didn't. And we kind of wear that as like a badge of honor, when actually what that says is that I'm not listening to my body. I don't know when I'm hungry. I don't know when my body needs to drink water, go to the loo. Like, those are sort of, the warning signs, and just even feeling guilty for resting or saying no, or where
Yeah.
like you feel like you have to sacrifice yourself. So even if I'm absolutely dead and dying and really sick, oh, I can't not go to work. I'm just not well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, this next question sort of ties into what you said in the beginning, and I'd like to unpack this and unravel it a lot more. Why are healthcare workers so vulnerable to emotional exhaustion in comparison to other professions or other professionals?
So, I mean, I think that we are in a high risk environment, but again, we also don't appreciate the risks within the environment. For us, the risk is if we have a violent patient, but that's just one of the risks that are faced. But the other kind of difficulty is that it's very difficult if to try to convince somebody that they need help for something that they don't see as a problem. Because a lot of the time, with the way the system is designed, it's all about like, you just need to cope. We get over it, we make a plan. Like, we are notorious for making plans and continue to make plans, but actually the system hasn't changed, nor has the system come to the party, but we're just continuing to make a plan. And so there's a vulnerability, because there's a kind of a not appreciating the impact of all of these of all
Yeah.
of things, because you came to the profession because it's you have this inherent nature about caring for others. We also come with our own kind of narratives, and so I've got to work to show myself approved and all of those things. And so it kind of compounds without us realizing, because we're never going to ask for help for something that we don't think is a problem.
Yeah.
And we also think we are immune, because like if 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 South Africans are struggling with a mental health problem, why would we as healthcare workers think that we were exempt from that stat? If we live in South Africa, we are still exposed to and there's also like secondary traumatization that happens. We live in a high trauma society. When you are seeing victims of, abuse and violence, that doesn't just go away. That stays with you, and you can be secondarily traumatized. So even our jobs are trauma hazards. But again,
Yeah.
we kind of normalize things that are not necessarily normal.
I think that really highlights a really great sort of motive that we always go with, which is prevention over care. It's changing the systems rather than creating contingencies, which again I think is really important for all professions, but especially this vulnerable sort of space of profession, which is being in the healthcare space. Now, you spoke about this before, and you spoke about noticing our vulnerabilities as healthcare workers. What are some of the early signs that someone might be experiencing, or that tells someone that they might be experiencing burnout or fatigue and may not realize it?
So it's very interesting. Like I always say, I can recognize burnout in the next person, but not in myself. And so you kind of need to think about what am I doing differently that says maybe I'm burnt out. So if
Yeah.
you have this, like, you're not a cynical person, but you've suddenly developed this, cynicism, or there's this emotional distancing, or even when there's just like this reduced patience, and there's this easy irritability, where your patient interactions become more like impatient, and there's an irritability when you are baseline more of a caring person, also just making more mistakes, or being unable to even switch off when you go home, where you're taking
Yeah.
your work home with you. And then we just start to see people as problems rather than, problems to solve rather than actual humans. And also just this persistent sense of like the world is unsafe, and just this persistent sense of, worry. But if you're not functioning the way you used to, I mean, for me, the telltale sign is often when I'm engaging with patients and I'm starting to prepare my dinner and all of those things, then I know maybe it's time to just take stock, because
Yeah.
maybe this is the beginning of that burnout. But when you're not showing up in the way that you used to, then we have, then we need to kind of take stock. Also, with burnout, it starts with stress, it becomes burnout, but it does then put us at risk for like depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
If you're kind of getting that rest and you're not feeling rested and you continue to feel tired, it may be starting to evolve, where you're not sleeping, your appetite is not great. You may be using alcohol to kind of calm down. If you start noticing that you going home and you taking alcohol more and more regularly in the evenings to kind of calm, then maybe we need to stop and say, like, what's happening, and am I burnt out?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's quite interesting that the telltales or the signs of burnout and compassion fatigue are in how we care for others and how we show up in others. And I think because of how the healthcare space sort of leads with that, a lot of healthcare workers wear this as a badge, right? There's this very strong culture of pushing through and showing up, even though we don't feel like it, even though the body tells you you can't actually do it. How does this mindset make it harder for people to recognize when they need help?
It makes it harder because we've normalized it. So we've normalized, like, you just need to cope. And so we then start to see our inability to cope and our nervous systems being completely dysregulated. We start to see it as a personal weakness when
Yeah.
actually there are systemic factors that are also involved. It's the systems, but we then personalize it and it becomes that there's a problem. I'm the problem. And then that starts the guilt, it starts the shame around I'm not coping, and it's not okay to not be okay. But with the constant kind of exposure to multiple stresses on multiple levels, it's really unrealistic to expect that we should be able to cope under these
Yeah.
circumstances. So it's back to, it's very hard for somebody to ask for help if they don't think that this is a problem.
Yeah.
So to think
So
it's fine,
they
I'm not
really,
going to ask
yeah.
for help. And it becomes like, now it's my personal failing, it's my personal weakness, when actually it's not normal.
Yeah. I really like that. And I think it helps for the viewers and other healthcare workers to really hear that showing up, whether you are okay or not, really isn't supposed to be a badge of honor. It means if you're not okay, you're not okay. You need to take a step back and start to really, resolve what it is that is happening so that you don't continue this pattern. It doesn't even become something worse like depression and anxiety, as you mentioned. Now, what practical and realistic steps can healthcare workers take to protect their mental health and emotional health while still doing the demanding work?
So here's the thing. I think that for the longest time, the emphasis has been on what can the healthcare worker do in order to make this right. So it's about, the messaging about, taking care of yourself and all of those things. But I say that we've got a much bigger, the solution needs to be bigger. It's bigger than just the individual healthcare workers. We really need to start advocating for systemic change because, it, again, especially with the kind of personality or the person that is a healthcare worker, it's kind of like, if I'm not getting this right, if I'm not taking care of myself, then like I'm failing at this. But actually, we do need to start looking at the system, because self-care, according to WHO, is a community effort. It's not just the individual effort, it's a community effort. So we need to start, yes, we can start at the individual level, where we do need to kind of shift from just taking care as an event versus we need to make this a lifestyle. So it's a culture shift in terms of how we view self-care. Oftentimes when you talk to healthcare workers about self, they'll tell you they don't have time, but it's just about regulating your nervous
Yeah.
system and even just being aware of where your nervous system is at, what is your patterns of stress. So it starts with awareness, and then it starts with the culture shift. But we need to be advocating for systemic changes in terms of the environment. So yes, we're not saying that the stress needs to go away, but we need to be advocating within the environments for the necessary supports that are needed, where your lunch break, for example, is a protected time, and that should come from the top all the way. Things
Yeah.
like in the environment. And that's what they found, like during COVID with the Healthcare Workers Care Network. They find that what's available to support staff, there's a disconnect, because what staff and healthcare workers really need are supportive systems in the workplace. They don't need to be referred to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, which is what it is. It's about making our workplaces more psychologically safe versus it's the onus is on the individual. So how do we begin making our workspaces more psychologically safe in terms of the support structures that are in place? But I really think we're going to need to start by breaking the silence around the stigma, because if we don't name these things, we're never going to be able to tame them. Because it's just this thing floating around and it's happening. We're still showing up, we're still functioning, we're not falling apart, but we're not okay.
Yeah.
So how do we begin beyond just the individual? This for me is advocating on a higher level in terms of the system also needs to make changes to support the healthcare workers beyond just when it's crisis point and we only referring for crisis intervention. What are we doing within the workplaces? And for me, it's now no longer just a mental health issue. This is a labor issue. It's an HR issue, because mental health in the workplace just generally is, it's something that we have to start the conversations around, the psychological safety. Sorry.
That's very, very empowering. Coming from what you've said, that we need to change the systems. And when you look at systems, it's not just the healthcare worker, which is literally at the bottom. It moves up from the hierarchy, and that needs to change. And I respect that so much. And I wish and hope that the viewers listening are able to start talking about that and opening that conversation to say, actually, I do need help, but I think that my help starts from the top and then it trickles down to me. And in that way, I am able to get what it is that I need. And I'm also able to process things a little bit better, but not get to this point where I'm burnt out and I also have compassion fatigue. Dr. Alicia, to wrap up, I would like to know, for anyone who is listening and who's watching this episode, and they feel very exhausted and they feel disconnected to their work and to who they are because of their work, what is one message or a takeaway that you would like to leave with them today?
So one for me, or the biggest kind of struggle in getting healthcare workers to access, like even just support, is just first acknowledging that it's okay not to be okay. And once you've acknowledged that it's okay not to be okay, then you actually have to name it. Because if you can't name what it is you're experiencing, then you can't tame it. So we can't go anywhere if you're not okay, but we can't say that we're not okay. And if we don't say, like, this is it, we're never going to get to a point of doing anything about it. So if you can't name it, you can't tame it. But it is okay not to be okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alicia, for joining us and really unpacking this. I actually have learned a lot, and I hope that our viewers have too. And this was very eye-opening to the fact that it's okay to not be okay, and these are the reasons why. But it also is very important to look into those reasons and really unpack what it means for us and how we can work around sort of unraveling and even just solving the issue. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining this session and for being a part of it. And if you would like another session like this, join us again next week on Ask the Experts on Friday, 1 p.m. Thank you.